USS Bonhomme Richard was a Wasp-class amphibious ship of the U.S. Navy. It was commissioned on 15 August 1998. In today's video, we are going to talk about the $2 billion U.S. Navy aircraft carrier. Stay tuned to know more! The Bonhomme Richard, commissioned in 1998, had 14 cavernous decks designed to carry aircraft, armored vehicles, and almost 2,000 Marines into war. On 12 July 2020, a fire started on a lower vehicle storage layer while the ship was undergoing maintenance at Naval Base San Diego. It took 4 days for firefighters to destroy the fire, which has harmed at least 63 sailors and civilians. It has also destroyed the ship. After a long investigation into the cause of the fire, a sailor was accused of arson but was released at trial. Repairs to the ship were estimated to take up to 7 years and cost up to $3.2 billion, which is why the ship was decommissioned on 15 April 2021 and sold for scrap. Ingalls Shipbuilding had accepted the contract to create the ship on 11 December 1992 and laid down her keel on 18 April 1995. She was launched on 14 March 1997, delivered to the Navy on 12 May 1998, and commissioned on 15 August 1998. The average cost of a Wasp-class landing helicopter dock ship was estimated to be $1.4 billion in 2020, whereas the program unit cost of an America-class LHA was expected to be around $3.6 billion in 2020. In 2020, the cost of replacing the ship was estimated to be almost $4 billion. History: Bonhomme Richard took the place of USS Essex as the command ship for Expeditionary Strike Group 7 and switched home port from San Diego, California to Sasebo, Japan on 23 April 2012. During the summer of 2013, Bonhomme Richard participated in Exercise Talisman Sabre 2013. Maneuvers were performed off Queensland, Australia, and in the Coral Sea. After the exercise, the ship sailed for Sydney, arriving on 16 August 2013. Bonhomme Richard served in the air-sea rescue operation of the capsized South Korean ferry MV Seawall with helicopters on 16 April 2014. Bonhomme Richard participated in Exercise Talisman Sabre 2017, including more than 33,000 Australian and U.S. troops in June 2017 along with Bonhomme Richard. 20 other ships and more than 200 aircraft took part in what was Australia's largest exercise till date. If you are liking this content so far, please consider subscribing and liking this video. Now let's continue. July 2020 fire. People reported that an explosion happened at about 8:50 a.m. on 12 July 2020 aboard Bonhomme Richard, while in her home port at Naval Base San Diego undergoing maintenance. The emerging fire was fueled by paper, cloth, rags, and not by fuel oil or other dangerous material. Since the ship was in maintenance, onboard fire suppression systems had been disabled, postponing the onset of firefighting efforts, according to Admiral Sobek. The fire was claimed to have started in an area that is generally used to park military trucks while the ship is at sea, but where shipyard workers might have temporarily placed other items containing combustible materials. The day the fire exploded, 17 sailors and 4 civilians were taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries, and all but 5 were released by the morning of the next day. By 14 July, the number of injured had risen to 61, as more people were treated for minor injuries, including heat exhaustion and smoke inhalation. On 16 July, 5 days after the blast, the Navy announced that all fires had been destroyed. The minor injury total had grown to 63 total. Fire and water damage were maintained on 11 of 14 decks. Sections of the flight deck and other decks were warped and bulging, while the island was almost gutted. The Navy also removed the aft mast of the damaged ship to ensure that it would not fall down. A sailor who was charged with intentionally setting one of the worst non-combat fires in the U.S. Navy history, which destroyed the $1.2 billion USS Bonhomme Richard in San Diego Bay, was recently found not guilty on all counts by a Navy judge. Seaman recruit Ryan Sawyer Mays, who had been facing life in prison if sentenced on charges of aggravated arson and intentionally hazarding a vessel, cried on the defense team's table after hearing the decision. The 9-day trial took place just a short walk from the pier where the immense amphibious assault ship burned for more than 4 days in 2020. Navy prosecutors described Seaman Mays as an angry young failure who had wished to become a Navy SEAL, but dropped out of the notoriously penalizing selection course and was reassigned to mop floors and scrape paint below decks on the Bonhomme Richard. He was so angry that he set his ship on fire. Navy defense lawyers claimed that the fire was a result of carelessness and complacency on the part of Navy commanders, and that there was no proof that the fire was arson or that Seaman Mays had lit it. It was in the middle of a 2-year, $250 million renovation when a young sailor standing watch on July 12, 2020, noticed smoke coming from the lower vehicle deck. The fire spread quickly, devouring a bunch of cardboard, batteries, hand sanitizer, and construction equipment packed into the vehicle deck. With the ship not completely functional, the crew failed to put out the flames. Almost all of the 807 fire extinguishers on board were out of order, and the sprinkler system did not work. 2 hours passed before civilian firefighters could put any water on the fire, but by then it was too late. The fire burned the ship to a darkened hulk of scrap. Later on, the Navy published a harsh report detailing a cascade of mistakes and neglect that set the stage for the catastrophe and formally scolded 28 people, including the top commanders of the ship and the admiral who was in charge of the U.S. Pacific Fleet.